Hi. While we figure out how to work that, the slides are actually over there, and you also have it on your WhatsApp. Is that correct? All right, great. You're all year 2, right? No, year 3? Year 1. Year 3, okay. Then the rest, year 1? Okay, so some of you year 1, some of you are year 3, no year 2s. Are there any year 2s? Okay, great, thank you. Just to have an indication, how many of you here, have an entrepreneur in your family? 1, 2? Nope. So the rest of you, 3? Okay. So the rest of you, I assume that your families are people working in the corporate sector? Would that be correct? So corporate sector, family work, family members. How many of you? Show of hands. Then the rest, no need to work. Inherited wealth. Okay, very good. That's even better. What happens if I speak like this without the mic? Can you hear me behind? All right, great. I'm just getting a lot of echo, so I'm just wondering whether it upsets you. If it doesn't, then I'll just go on. Right, so let me tell you a bit about me. So my life has gone through 3 steps where I started out in corporate, and then I got hired to run companies, not just one, right? And then I finally became an entrepreneur. So I started my entrepreneurship journey very late, at 46 years old, right? So usually, what do you think is the average age of entrepreneurs? So is it 20-something? If you think it's 20-something, give me a show of hands. 30-something, show of hands. All right, 20-something, yes. 30-something? Okay, more people with hands up. 40-something. Okay, so this is an interesting study done in the US. They found that the average age of a successful entrepreneur is actually 49 years old, which was very interesting. So when I started at 46, then I realized that, okay lah, maybe I got hope, right? And I'm not too late, right? So that gave me hope. But along the way, that journey has been very interesting. So originally, my first job was working at what was then the Apple distributor for Malaysia, Singapore. And this thing went dead on me for a while. Okay, looks like we have a lot of tech problems, but okay, we will go with it. This was me just a few years ago, right? So that was from the days when I started my business that year was 2016. So what we did was we built the original premise of the business was building an event venues and services booking platform. It's called Vimo. It started in 2014. And through that time, what we did was we started from scratch. How many of you are familiar with the term bootstrap? Anyone who knows the term bootstrap? No? So bootstrap means you essentially fund it yourself with whatever means necessary, whether it's sell your car, sell your house, sell yourself, right, to fund the business. And that's what I did originally. I sold an apartment to fund this back in 2014, right? So with that seed capital, with that personal seed capital, the business started. Along the way, 3 years later, we did our first crowdfunding campaign, right? Which was in 2017, where we raised 500,000 ringgit So you see two checks here, 250,000 ringgit, 250,000 ringgit. One half came from Cradle, the other half came from crowdfunding, which means we opened it up to public and people came in. We raised the 250,000, or rather this 500,000 ringgit in 4 days at that time, which was considered fast at that time. Right? So this was early days of ECF. This was the 10th campaign in 2017. Today, there are hundreds of companies that have raised funding through ECF. How many of you have friends or know somebody who has a company that has raised money through ECF? Ada tak? None. Okay. All right. So let's go on to what it takes to be an entrepreneur. All right? The mind of an entrepreneur. I think there's many questions that you can ask, but here are 6 critical questions. And I think if I distill it down, these are the 6 most important questions for me to ask myself whenever I engage into something new. Is there a problem? Oh, okay, finally. Is there a problem that needs fixing? If there's a problem that needs fixing, this is a lot better. If there's a problem that needs fixing and you think you're the person to solve it, then, okay, that's question number 1 answered. It means that you think that there's a gap in the industry and therefore it can be solved by a better solution. So for us, when we started Vimo, for me when I started Vimo, because I was essentially a one-man show at that time, right? So it's a very lonely journey, and I made it even lonelier by starting it alone. I asked the question, is there a problem that needs fixing where venue booking was concerned? And there was, because in my previous company, we were trying to do events and we couldn't book rooms online, right? So there was no place to find it easily. So that's why we built it in the first place. Is it global or local? Is this problem a global or local problem? You find this being asked of your investors. Your investors will want to know, are you solving a local problem? A local problem could be only within tailors. Are you solving a problem within tailors? Does it only exist in tailors? If it is the beginnings of a business, a small business, but it's still a business. Or is it global? Is this a problem that permeates every single country that you go to? We kind of knew that Vimo probably wasn't a global solution, but it was a local solution that would give us a head start into doing other things. But it was a start. Is your solution surmountable? So is this problem fixable by the solution that you're going to propose? If it's not, sometimes the cost of trying to fix it is actually harder or higher than what your solution can offer. Then it doesn't make good business sense because you're just going to lose money on this. Is an MVP possible? What's an MVP? Anybody knows what an MVP is? Person with a cap, since you have a cap as well, right? What do you think an MVP is? Most valuable person. You're not wrong. In a game context, most valuable player, right? So your Michael Jordans would be most valuable player, or even GOAT, right? But in this case, in a business setting, it is a minimum viable product. It means that you want to build something that people would use for the lowest cost solution, right? So the picture shows that here is that, yeah, a transport solution is a car, but the cheapest solution that somebody would use would be a skateboard. And if he cannot balance himself on a skateboard, then the next thing would be a bicycle. right? So, and then you move forward from there. So sometimes thinking of a minimum viable product is actually an art in itself or a challenge in itself. When we built Vimo, I actually took the mistakes that I learned from my previous startup. In our previous startup, we had very good investments into that company. I was running a company. I raised monies for that company. It wasn't mine. I was an employee then. I say I was a hired gun, right? People would hire me to run their companies for them. So we raised money for that we raised monies for that company. We started it because we had a lot of cash. We started hiring people and thought that we should build a very good solution and it would be kick-ass, right? That people would say, wow, this is fantastic. What we found out was that almost 80% of our solution wasn't used, right? The only solutions people used was probably up to 20% of it, right? Which kind of educated us. We took time, we took money, we hired lots of people to build a solution that was essentially underused. So if you can build a minimum viable product, it is very good. And that's what we set out to do when we built Vimo from the ground up. We built it on, how many of you are familiar with WordPress? Any tech guys here? No? Right. None. Okay. So if go Google WordPress and look at what WordPress is. WordPress is essentially understood as a blogging tool, but it's way more than that, right? So if you know what you can do with it, it is actually very, very powerful. It means that you can get a solution out to market within weeks. So to give you a comparison, the previous company I was with before I started Vimo, we took almost half a year to build a solution. We got our solution out on WordPress in 2 weeks, right? So that's the big difference. 2 weeks, again 6 months, you have 5.5 extra months to figure out what works, what doesn't work. In a business setting, that extra time is worth a lot of money. What are the unit economics, finally? What are unit economics? It means that whatever you do, for example, to acquire your customer, does it make sense? If your cost of acquiring a customer is 1,000 ringgit, but what you get back is 100 ringgit, there is a mismatch of your unit economics. Understandable that when you start your business, your cost of acquiring customers will be high. But over time, it must come down. If it doesn't come down, then you have a problem, right? So then you have what is perceived as a problem that Grab is facing today, right? Because they still have to spend more money to acquire customers than they're earning from that customer. And therefore, investors don't like it. After a point, investors won't like it, and they hammer your stock. And finally, right? Yeah, this is the final question. Is this my passion? Is this something I really want to do to solve it? I may have the idea, but if I don't have the passion to fix this problem, pass it on. Don't do it. Because this journey, this entrepreneurship journey, is going to drive you to your end, right? If you don't have the passion for it. Then there's something called entrepreneurship, right? So I started my life corporate, then as an entrepreneur, which means I was actually hired by other people to run their business, right? And you might think that how does being an entrepreneur apply to me if I'm going to work for another company or somebody else is going to hire me? I think there's a lot that you can learn, and here are some examples which are very good, right? How many of you recognize this phone? It's a very old phone. What phone is that? Do you know? Motorola? What's the model name? Anybody know the model name for this? Yes? No? Okay. So this is the Motorola Razr. This was actually a skunkworks project, which means the team that built this within Motorola went against the rules. They believed in the product. They thought that it would sell, and they built it. And they built it quietly. The engineers didn't like the product because they were against it. It was not according to the preset rules that Motorola at that time had in mind of what a good phone should be, right? So when they built this, they actually had hit some of the budget under a marketing fund, right? So that was how surreptitious it was. It was kept under the radar so that until they finally built the product, they got it out, they showed management liked it and rolled it out. They didn't really think that this would sell. They just thought it would be a cool statement. I think their initial projections were just about 1 million units, 2 million units. By the end of life, this phone, or this series of phones, had sold 150 million units for Motorola. Right? So before the iPhone was the iPhone, the Motorola Razr V3 was the phone that everyone wanted. It was the most desirable phone at that time. I think before all of you were born, right? You're all under 21, right? Correct? No, under 20, what? 22? 25. You have just been born, I think, at that time. Yeah, so my daughter is 26 years old, right? So this was born, this came out just as the time she was born, if I remember correctly. Have you heard of this term, 20% project? Anyone has heard of this term? No? Okay. It was actually enshrined in the early days of Google, right? Within Google, you were allowed to allot 20% of your time to work on side projects. One of those side projects is something called Google Mail, right? So it was a side project. It was not your first. It was not a top priority project. The engineers worked on this on their spare time, right? And then they came out with Google Mail, right? Which is not a bad side hustle project. So within an organization, if the organization structures it, you'll find that entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs would have a room to grow, right? And come up with new ideas. In fact, I think this would be a place where innovation happens. So typically with entrepreneurs, you make things fast, you break it fast. If it doesn't work, you junk it, you work on the next thing, right? And that's what Google did in the early years before they got so big. They actually encouraged this to come out with new innovations. Google Mail is one of it. There's another project called Google AdSense. Google AdSense today accounts for, I think, something like 15%, 20% of your total revenue. Right? So with these solutions, it became a very viable product, right? From something very minimum, something very done on a side project, it became actually an essential part of the business. Recognize this company? Got it. Nobody. I'll buy you coffee if you can figure this. You can tell me what this company is. You're all either very young or, okay, you all are very young, all right? So this is International Business Machines, IBM. They used to dominate the IT industry. They were the super giant of that time. Their dominance was that every single corporate computer in the US would almost always be an IBM. Every mainframe computer, every mini computer, almost always is an IBM at that point, right? So they had 80% market share, dominated the market like nobody else at that time. In the early 80s, they thought the PC was a toy. But nevertheless, they gave this division some money and said, go figure out and see whether you can build something. So what these guys did was that with a very small team, they built the IBM PC. And again, being IBM, for a while, IBM dominated the PC market, right? So when they launched, they essentially killed every other competing personal computer in that space. And it really started as a side project. Out of this project was launched another company. Any guesses for which company launched because of the IBM PC? Made them $1 billion company. Got it? It's very early in the morning, right? So, Ji-Sing, nice to see you here. What do you think, which company became $1 billion company, multi-billion dollar corporation? Sorry? Apple was already $1 billion corporation at that time before IBM came in and whacked them. There was one company, software company, that became very big because IBM gave them a chance. Microsoft, exactly, right? It was IBM that built Microsoft, right? So IBM can stand for I built Microsoft, right? Because they really made Microsoft super, powerful. By the time they realized software was the key, it was kind of too late, right? Microsoft then called the shots already. Right? My favorite company, the company that I used to work for, built a computer called the Macintosh, right? Some of you are on Macs. The Macintosh was started out also as a side project within Apple. Basically, they wanted Steve Jobs not to cause trouble within the company. So they said, we'll give you money, you're going to start another project. Then he built the Macintosh, right, with a relatively small team again. And the Macintosh is today. How many of you are Mac users here? I see a few Apples. The rest of you are on Windows, right? Yeah. It became the behemoth that it is today. And then along the way, they also pivoted and changed. So I think this is in your slides. I've got a few more minutes only, but I'll give you this quick slide because this served as a canvas for me to use when I was building my startup, right? It probably came after. Before I built my startup, I didn't put this in the canvas like this, but along the way, what would happen was that we realized that actually you can just break up your startup ideas into a few areas, right? So you can look at the columns. The first column would be your threats, your gaps, your blue oceans. Your second column is, do you go it alone, you pair up with somebody? Is there a way to growth hack, which means find a shortcut to grow your business or collaborate? And then finally, you look at your measure of success, right? All your unit economics, your value creation is here. So for us, when we started, one of the things that we did was that one of the key collaboration partners that we had in our early days was actually Grab. It didn't really impact us that much in terms of business, but it really impacted us in terms of presence and making us look like a very solid company that Grab would partner with us. So what we did was I managed to get Grab to give me $5 vouchers anytime anybody booked an event, right? So at that time, Grab was giving away 5 ringgit. Every time you book a Grab ride, they would give you $5, right? So I had a voucher, right? I had a code, which anybody who booked an event on Vimo would then be a recipient of this voucher. So if you're planning a wedding, a birthday party, Grab, if you use this code, you get 5 ringgit discount, which was good, right? Because at that time, Grab prices were cheap, and then with 5 ringgit on top of it, you get an even better discount. We were very early in our stage of the business. It made us look like a very viable business because Grab was willing to partner with us. So sometimes collaboration is not because you actually want to get a deal out of it, but because it just makes you look bigger than you actually are. At that time, when we did this, we were at that point a 3-man company. So it just gives you an idea that it then allows you to escalate your presence and your brand. I don't have time to go into these details, but Essentially, what we did was that if you look at this, it looks all like numbers, right? It is all numbers. We were measuring every single thing that was happening on the website. Anytime anybody clicked any button, we wanted to see where the response was, what was the outcome of it. Initially, we can see the conversion rate, the form to inquiry ratio was very low at 15.2%. By December the next year, it had already increased to 98.5%, right? It meant that also our cost of acquiring customers reduced significantly as we progress. So we went from $400 for our first customer, 400 ringgit for our first customer to acquire him, to by 2019, it was less than 1 ringgit to acquire a paying customer. And each paying customer would pay us on average about 10,000 ringgit, right? So that is what you do when you say, okay, I look at cost of acquisition, does it make sense? This made sense. Along the way, something happened, right? So in the valuation of the company grew, right? So it went from 0 to 3 million to 20 million by 2020. But of course, we know what happened in 2020, right? The lockdown happened, and we had to grow or die. In 2019, we had already started planning. We already knew that our event venue service business cannot scale to the point which it becomes a $100 million business or $200 million business. It won't, right? So we needed to look at building an ecosystem with the customers we already had on our platform. One is we either offer them more services, or if there was an opportunity, acquire companies that are already in that space. And if possible, even better, acquire them cheap, right? Or using shares, which means we don't even pay a single cent, right? But we do a share swap. So we used a bit of both to grow our business. In 2020, as the lockdown happened, it was actually our biggest period of growth at that point. One of the things that we had that grew that business was an alcohol on-demand business that we had purchased in December 2019, just a few months before the lockdown, right? So when the lockdown happened, one of the key products that people bought was alcohol, because you cannot go out to drink. You can only drink at home. People bought it, right? And to give you an idea of that escalation of growth, in 3 months, we did a year's worth of business, right? So that's how big that business grew in 2020. So this is the company today. Like I said, we grew through acquisition. We grew through arrangement where, based on this roadmap, this idea that we had, what are the solutions that would fit? What are the companies that would fit into this plan? So today we have an ecosystem of companies that provide almost A to Z of everything a retail company or an F&B company needs. In fact, one part of it is our working capital financing business, right? So working capital financing business is essentially a very good word to use to say money lending, right? It is a money lending business, right? It comes with a money lending license, and we have used that to help our customers who are in need of cash flow assistance to grow their business or tide them through difficult times. So that is how sometimes we look at the journey. So if your journey is that you're just building one company and stop there, might not be enough. It's like F&B, right? If you're building one restaurant or one cafe, you say, I only want to open 2 cafes. Chances are you really won't be able to make money. You've got to look at whether you can scale to at least 5 outlets, right? Because that's almost the break-even point. So if you look at being an entrepreneur, what are the traits that you should have or look towards building? Is number 1, it's not the end all and be all, but it's a good indicator. It's number 1, you've got to be curious. If you're curious at problems in the market, right, or things, then you'll always be figuring out, can I think of something better to do? Can I invent something, or can I do it better? It may be the first step to something else, but can I even begin with something simple to fix this? So that's curiosity, trait number one. Trait number two is a will to win, right? Because if you don't have a desire to win, you're going to say, okay lah, never mind lah, it's all right lah, right? It's never all right. We're always figuring out how can we win around this, right? What are the ways for us to win? It might not be the direct approach. Can I flank it? Can I go from the side? Can I go from the top? Can I go from the bottom, right? Is there a way for me to get through this? You have to have that. And finally, right, is the trait of doggedness. It means never giving up, right? And this is perhaps the trait that I think is most important in an entrepreneur, in somebody who's building a business, because you can't go halfway and then say, I give up, right? You have to go on, right? Maybe this current path is not the way to go, but can I pursue this further but change a bit? So for us, it was grow or die, pivot, and expand the business model, right? So essentially, we really changed the business model and grew from there. Today, the original business is a very, very small part of the group. The group, if you look at it, our first year in business, we did 40,000 ringgit. This year, we'll be doing about 80 million ringgit, right? So that's the difference, right? How we've grown from that to here. But of course, it's not just one person. It's many people coming together. So I don't take credit for all that. I think the team that has come together now is fantastic, right? It's because of all these people coming together that we're able to do that, all right? So with that, I thank you very much for your time and hand back the time to Dr. Vimala. How many of you here think that being an entrepreneur is glamorous? To be the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Elon Musk? Okay, don't even go that far, right? Who's a local champion? Who's a local champion? Yeah, I can't even think of a local champion. Sorry, Anthony Tan. Who would think that you want to be the next Anthony Tan or Joel Neo of Groupon? And then faith. None? Yes? No? Not sure. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.